Captain Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Haven's Gate colony, watching the sky burn. Red streaks of alien fire cut through the atmosphere like angry scars. The emergency lights cast everything in bloody shadows. Around her, the defense team worked frantically at their stations, but she could see the fear in their eyes. "Captain, we've lost the outer defense grid," reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice barely steady. "The aliens broke through Sector 7. Sarah nodded grimly. She had expected this. Haven's Gate was an agricultural colony, not a military base. They had some basic defenses, a few plasma cannons, some fighter drones, energy shields around the main settlements. But against what was coming from the sky, they might as well have been throwing rocks. The Vex Dominion had arrived 3 days ago. First came the scouts, sleek black ships that moved like hunting birds. Then the main fleet appeared, filling the sky with massive vessels that looked more grown than built. They were organic, twisted things with surfaces that pulsed like living skin. "Sir, incoming transmission from the alien fleet," called out Communications Officer Park. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature that made Sarah's skin crawl. It stood roughly human-shaped but taller, with glossy black skin that seemed to shift and flow. Its face had too many eyes, all of them focusing on her with cold intelligence. "Human colony," it spoke in perfect English, though its voice had an odd harmonic quality. "You will surrender your biomass. Resistance is pointless. We have studied your species. We know your limitations." Sarah stepped forward, her hand resting on her sidearm. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of Haven's Gate Colony. We are a peaceful agricultural settlement. We have no quarrel with you." The creature tilted its head. "Peace is irrelevant. You possess biological matter that we require. Your compliance will make the process efficient. Your resistance will make it educational." "Then you don't know humans very well," Sarah replied. "We don't give up easily." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "We have consumed 47 species across this galaxy. Your determination is noted. It will not save you." The transmission cut off. Sarah turned to her team. "All right, people, you heard them. They want a fight, we'll give them one. Torres, activate all defensive systems. Park, send out the evacuation signal to the outer settlements. Get everyone to the main colony shields." "Captain," Torres said quietly, "our defenses won't hold against that fleet. We've got maybe 12 hours. "Then we make those 12 hours count," Sarah said firmly. "And we make sure Earth knows what happened here." The first real attack came an hour later. The alien ships descended through the atmosphere like a swarm of black insects. Their weapons were unlike anything in human military files, beams of energy that seemed to eat through matter rather than simply destroying it. Where they struck, metal and stone didn't just break apart. It dissolved, turning into a gray substance that the aliens somehow collected. The colony's plasma cannons opened fire, bright blue streaks reaching up toward the alien ships. Several hits connected, causing alien vessels to spiral away, trailing dark smoke. But for every ship they destroyed, 3 more took its place. "Sector 4 shields are failing," reported Ensign Kim from the defense station. "They're concentrating fire on the residential areas." Sarah felt her jaw clench. The aliens weren't just trying to win quickly. They were targeting civilians first. "Redirect power from the industrial shields. Protect the residential zones." "But sir, that leaves the food processing plants exposed." "The plants don't have children in them," Sarah snapped. "Do it." The battle raged through the day and into the night. The colonists fought with everything they had. Civilian pilots took up mining ships and attacked alien vessels. Engineers rigged explosive charges and drove ground vehicles into alien landing parties. Farmers took hunting rifles and defended their homes street by street. But the Vex kept coming. They landed troops. Creatures that looked like the ones on the screen but larger, covered in natural armor that turned aside human bullets. They moved in perfect coordination, never speaking, never hesitating. When one fell, the others stepped over its body without pause. By the second day, the outer settlements were gone. The main colony's shields flickered and failed. Alien ships circled overhead like vultures, occasionally dropping down to collect the gray substance that had once been buildings and people. Sarah stood in the command center, now half destroyed from a near miss. Most of her staff was dead or evacuated. Only Lieutenant Torres remained, still trying to coordinate the last pockets of resistance. "Captain," he said, his voice hollow with exhaustion, "we're receiving reports from the underground shelters. The aliens have broken through in 12 locations. They're not killing people, they're converting them." Sarah closed her eyes. She had seen the reports from the early attacks. The Vex didn't just harvest dead matter. They could transform living beings into more of themselves, adding their knowledge and memories to the collective. "How long do we have?" "Maybe an hour before they reach the main shelter." Sarah walked to the communications console and began typing. Her fingers moved quickly, composing humanity's last message from Haven's Gate. "Emergency transmission to Earth Command," she spoke into the recorder. "This is Captain Sarah Chen, Haven's Gate Colony. We are under attack by an alien force calling itself the Vex Dominion. They are not raiders or conquerors. They are harvesters. They consume entire worlds, converting all biological matter into more of themselves." An explosion somewhere nearby made the walls shake. Torres looked up from his station. "Captain, they've breached the command level. We need to go." Sarah continued recording. "The Vex fleet consists of approximately 300 vessels of unknown design. They possess superior technology and show perfect coordination. Most importantly, they are not interested in conquest or negotiation. They view other species as resources to be harvested." The sound of energy weapons grew closer. Through the broken windows, Sarah could see black armored figures moving through the smoke. Haven's Gate housed 2.3 million souls. Farmers, engineers, teachers, children. They fought bravely. They held the line as long as they could. Remember them. Remember that they faced the darkness and did not surrender. A Vex warrior appeared in the doorway, its multiple eyes focusing on Sarah. She drew her sidearm but didn't fire yet. "Tell them we held the line," she said into the recorder. "Tell them the Vex are coming, and tell them—" She looked directly at the alien creature, meeting its alien gaze without fear. "Tell them that if they want humanity, they'd better bring everything they have, because we're not going quietly." The alien raised its weapon. Sarah hit the transmission button, sending her message racing across space toward Earth. Then she raised her pistol and fired. The last transmission from Haven's Gate cut to static at 23:47 local time. By dawn, the colony was gone, transformed into gray dust that the Vex fleet collected in massive cargo holds. The planet itself remained, but everything that had made it alive was gone. But Sarah's message was already traveling through hyperspace, carrying with it a warning that would change the course of galactic history. Humanity had lost its first world to the Vex Dominion. It would be their last. Admiral Marcus Stone stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, staring at the holographic display that showed the last moments of Haven's Gate. Captain Chen's final transmission played on repeat, her voice steady even as alien weapons charged. In the background, around the table, the military leaders of Earth sat in grim silence. 2.3 million people, said General Harrison, head of Colonial Defense. Gone in less than 72 hours. Stone nodded slowly. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars from the border wars, but his hands were steady as he manipulated the hologram. Intelligence estimates put the alien fleet at 300 ships. They have technology we've never seen before, and according to our long-range sensors, they're not stopping. Secretary of Defense Williams leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "After they finished with Haven's Gate, the fleet split into multiple groups. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected them moving toward the Perseus colonies. Kepler Station, New Moscow, Trinity's Garden. They're hitting everything in their path." The room erupted in urgent conversation. The Perseus colonies housed nearly 50 million people across 12 worlds. If the aliens moved at the same speed they had shown, at Haven's Gate those worlds had weeks at best. Stone raised his hand for silence. "We have a choice to make. We can evacuate the outer colonies and fall back to the core systems, Try to build a defensive line around Earth and Mars. Or what? Asked Admiral Chen, no relation to the fallen captain. Stone's expression hardened. Or we activate the Armada Protocol. The room fell silent. The Armada Protocol was theoretical, a war plan so massive that most military planners considered it impossible. It called for the mobilization of every human military asset, the conversion of civilian infrastructure to military production, and the deployment of the largest fleet in human history. Marcus, General Harrison said carefully, the protocol calls for 12,000 combat vessels. We have maybe 800 ships in active service across all of human space. Then we build more, Stone replied simply. We have 6 months before the aliens reach the core colonies. That's enough time. Secretary Williams shook her head. The cost would be enormous. We'd have to convert civilian shipyards, militarize merchant vessels, draft every available pilot and crew member. The economic impact alone would be less than the cost of human extinction. Stone cut her off. His voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. These aliens don't want our territory or our resources. They want us, all of us, every man, woman, and child converted into gray dust and added to their collective. He gestured to the hologram, which now showed a star chart of human space. Look at the pattern. They're not randomly raiding. They're systematically clearing sectors, moving inward toward our core worlds. This isn't a raid or a border skirmish. This is extermination. Admiral, Chen studied the tactical display. Even if we could build such a fleet, we don't have the crews to man them. Training new personnel takes years. Not if we conscript experienced civilian pilots, Stone replied. Cargo haulers, mining ship operators, passenger liner crews, anyone who can fly a ship in space. We give them crash courses in military tactics and put them in charge of support vessels. And for the main combat ships? Stone's smile was grim. We use what we have. Every academy graduate, every reservist, every retired officer who can still walk. And we give them the biggest, most heavily armed ships we can build. Over the following days, Stone's plan took shape. The Armada Protocol was officially activated by emergency vote of the Colonial Council. Across human space, the greatest mobilization in history began. At Luna Naval Yards, Chief Engineer Rosa Valdez watched as civilian shipyards were converted to military production. Luxury passenger liners were stripped down and rebuilt as troop transports. Cargo haulers received armor plating and weapon mounts. Even private yachts were militarized, turned into fast attack boats and reconnaissance vessels. It's impossible, her assistant Martin complained as they watched workers install plasma cannons on a former cruise ship. We're supposed to build 40 dreadnoughts in 6 months. The Luna yards have never built more than 6 capital ships in a year. Rosa didn't look up from her datapad. Then we work faster. We strip everything non-essential, use modular construction, and pray to whatever gods are listening that they hold together long enough to reach the enemy. The ships being built were not elegant. They were crude, blocky things designed for one purpose: carrying as many weapons as possible into combat. The new dreadnoughts were basically flying gun platforms, bristling with plasma cannons, missile tubes, and point defense systems. They looked like metal asteroids that had been hollowed out and filled with weapons. Meanwhile, at military bases across the solar system, the largest recruitment drive in human history was underway. Marine Colonel James Morrison, nicknamed Reaper for his efficiency in the border wars, found himself training civilians to be soldiers in record time. Listen up, he barked at a formation of new recruits. 3 months ago, you were accountants and shop clerks and college students. Now you're Marines. The enemy we're facing doesn't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They turn you into one of them. So we're going to teach you to kill them first. The recruits came from everywhere. Corporate executives trained alongside asteroid miners. University professors learned to use assault rifles next to unemployed factory workers. What united them was simple. They had all seen the footage from Haven's Gate, and they all understood what was coming. The most surprising volunteers came from an unexpected source. The prison colonies of Titan and Europa sent a message to Earth. Release us, and we'll fight. Murderers, thieves, and pirates who had been locked away for life suddenly found themselves offered a chance at redemption. Many of them jumped at it. "They call us the Forlorn Hope Battalions," explained Marcus Webb, a former pirate captain who now wore marine fatigues. "Criminals and outcasts first into battle and last to retreat. The brass figures were expendable. They're probably right. But the aliens killed innocent people at Haven's Gate. That's something even we can't stomach." As the months passed, the fleet began to take shape. At its heart was the Retribution, Admiral Stone's flagship. 2 kilometers long and bristling with enough firepower to level a city, it represented everything humanity could build when they put their minds to it. Its crew of 50,000 included some of the best military minds in human space. But the Retribution was just one ship among thousands. Dreadnoughts and battleships formed the backbone of the fleet, supported by carriers loaded with fighter craft. Cruisers and destroyers provided escort duties while specialized vessels handled everything from electronic warfare to medical support. The logistics were staggering. The fleet would need to carry supplies for millions of people across interstellar distances. Entire asteroid mining operations were converted to ammunition production. Hydroponic farms were built in space to provide food. Factory ships were constructed to repair battle damage and replace lost equipment. Most impressive of all were the numbers. When complete, the human armada consisted of 12,000 combat vessels and another 8,000 support ships, 20,000 ships carrying 6 million personnel, the largest single military force ever assembled by any species. As the fleet gathered at the Luna staging area, its sheer size became apparent. The formation stretched across thousands of cubic kilometers, so vast that it created its own gravity wells. Ships had to maintain precise spacing to avoid collisions, and traffic control required an entirely new computer system. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of the Retribution, looking out at the assembled fleet. Dreadnoughts hung in space like metal moons, their hulls reflecting starlight. Carriers launched practice flights of fighters that swarmed between the larger ships like clouds of angry insects. Supply vessels moved constantly between formations, keeping the massive fleet fed and armed. "Sir," reported his aide, Lieutenant. "Commander Park, all fleet elements report ready for departure." Stone nodded. Intelligence indicated that the aliens had finished with the Perseus colonies and were moving toward the core systems. They had maybe 2 months before the Vex reached Earth's outer defenses, but they wouldn't wait for the aliens to come to them. The fleet would carry the war to the enemy, meeting them in the dark between the stars. 20,000 ships carrying humanity's response to the destruction of Haven's Gate. "Signal all ships," Stone commanded. "Begin departure sequence. Time to show these aliens what happens when they mess with humanity." As the vast fleet began to move, its shadow fell across Earth's moon. For a moment it seemed as if the stars themselves had gone dark, blocked out by the greatest armada in galactic history. The aliens had destroyed one human world. Now humanity was coming to return the favor, and they were bringing everything they had. The journey to Vex space took 3 months, and during that time the human armada became something more than just a collection of ships. It became a moving civilization, a city among the stars that stretched across light years of empty space. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the intelligence center aboard the Retribution, studying holographic displays of alien biology. Once a xenobiologist studying peaceful first contact scenarios, she now found herself humanity's leading expert on how to kill the Vex. The irony wasn't lost on her. "The key thing to understand," she explained to a room full of Marine officers, "is that individual Vex aren't really individuals at all. They're more like fingers on a hand, controlled by a central consciousness that coordinates all their actions." Colonel Morrison leaned forward. "So, if we kill the brain, the fingers stop working?" "In theory, yes. But the problem is that the Vex Collective seems to have multiple brain centers. Kill one and another takes over. They've built redundancy into their entire species." The hologram showed a detailed scan of Vex physiology, taken from bodies recovered at Haven's Gate. The creatures were biological but heavily modified. Their bones were reinforced with metal alloys. Their organs were arranged for maximum efficiency rather than evolutionary logic. Most disturbing of all, each individual carried genetic material from dozens of other species. They're not just conquerors, Dr. Vasquez continued. They're collectors. Every species they encounter gets added to their biological database. They take the best traits from each one and incorporate them into their own biology. What about weaknesses? Asked Captain Torres, one of the few survivors from Haven's Gate who had been evacuated during the final hours. They're vulnerable to quantum disruption. Their neural networks can't handle certain frequencies of energy. But they adapt quickly. Whatever works once probably won't work twice. Meanwhile, throughout the fleet, humanity was adapting as well. The massive armada had its own problems to solve. Feeding 6 million people in space required constant supply runs by automated cargo ships. Waste disposal meant processing thousands of tons of garbage every day. Medical care for the fleet required floating hospitals larger than most space stations. Chief Engineer Rosa Valdez had perhaps the most challenging job in the fleet. Keeping 20,000 ships operational during a 3-month journey meant constantly managing breakdowns, repairs, and upgrades. Her teams worked around the clock, moving between vessels in small repair craft. The problem with building ships this fast, she explained to her staff, is that we didn't have time to test everything properly. We're basically doing field testing on our way to war. Her biggest concern was the hastily converted civilian vessels. A former luxury liner now serving as a troop transport had developed dangerous vibrations in its hull. An old cargo hauler, being used as a fighter carrier, kept losing power to its launch bays. Even some of the new military ships had problems. Plasma cannons that overheated, armor plating that cracked under stress, life support systems that worked perfectly on paper but failed in practice. Keep fixing them, Rosa ordered. If we lose ships to mechanical failure before we even reach the enemy, this whole mission becomes pointless. The fleet's organization was as impressive as its size. At the center were the heavy dreadnoughts, massive ships designed to trade fire with enemy capital vessels. Around them moved the carriers, launching and recovering fighter squadrons that scouted ahead and provided close support. Cruisers and destroyers formed protective screens, while specialized ships handled everything from electronic warfare to medical evacuation. But the real innovation was in the support vessels. The fleet carried its own shipyards, massive factory ships that could build replacement fighters and spare parts during the journey. Mobile refineries processed raw materials collected from asteroids along the route. Even entertainment vessels helped maintain morale during the long trip. Admiral Stone spent his days moving between different sections of the fleet, checking on everything from weapon systems to food production. The Bridge of the Retribution had become the nerve center for the largest military operation in human history. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Park, "we're receiving long-range sensor data from our scout ships. The Vex have established defensive positions in the Kepler system." Stone studied the tactical display. The aliens had built massive orbital fortresses around key worlds, creating interlocking fields of fire. They had also deployed what looked like artificial asteroid fields, presumably to break up attacking formations. "They're learning," Stone observed. "After Haven's Gate, they know we're coming." Intelligence reports painted a grim picture. The Vex had fortified 17 star systems along their border with human space. Each system contained hundreds of defensive platforms, supported by mobile fleets that could respond to attacks. The aliens had turned entire sectors of space into fortress zones. A traditional military doctrine would suggest a concentrated assault on one system, explained Admiral Chen during a strategy meeting. Break through at a single point, then expand the breach. Stone shook his head. That's what they expect. The Yao. Vex think logically. They plan for the most efficient attack patterns, but humans don't always do what's logical. His plan was audacious to the point of seeming insane. Instead of concentrating their forces, Stone intended to attack all 17 systems simultaneously. It would split the human fleet into smaller groups, but it would also force the Vex to defend everywhere at once. "Sir," objected General Harrison, "via quantum communication from Earth, dividing our forces like that goes against every principle of military strategy. We'll be outnumbered in every engagement." Exactly, Stone replied. The Vex are used to fighting enemies who follow logical patterns. They plan for efficient attacks and economical use of forces. But humans are wonderfully illogical. When we're angry enough, we'll hit them with everything everywhere all at once. As the fleet approached Vex space, the psychological preparation became as important as the military planning. Chaplains held services for dozens of different faiths. Therapists helped soldiers deal with the stress of impending combat. Entertainment. Programs tried to maintain morale during the final weeks of the journey. But perhaps most important were the remembrance ceremonies. Each ship held services honoring the dead of Haven's Gate. Photos of the victims were displayed throughout the fleet. Farmers and teachers, children and grandparents. People who had done nothing more threatening than grow food and raise families. "Remember why we're here," Colonel Morrison told his Marines during one such ceremony. "We're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting because someone needs to speak for the dead. We're fighting because if we don't stop them here, they'll just keep coming." The Marines he addressed were a mixture of career soldiers and hastily trained civilians. Some were veterans of the border wars. Others had been accountants or shop clerks just months before. But they all understood what was at stake. In the final weeks before reaching Vex space, the fleet conducted massive training exercises. Fighter squadrons practiced coordinated attacks against mock targets. Marine units rehearsed boarding actions in zero gravity. Entire ship crews ran battle drills until they could operate their vessels in their sleep. The exercises revealed both strengths and weaknesses. The hastily trained civilian crews sometimes made mistakes that would have been fatal in real combat. But they also showed a creativity and adaptability that impressed the professional military officers. "They don't fight by the book," observed Captain Martinez after watching a group of former cargo pilots execute an unorthodox attack pattern. "Half the time their tactics are completely wrong, but the other half they come up with solutions that no military academy would ever teach." As the fleet finally approached the edge of Vex space, long-range sensors began picking up the alien defensive positions. The scope of their preparations was staggering. Fortress worlds surrounded by weapon platforms, mobile fleets patrolling between systems, even what appeared to be artificial gravity wells designed to trap attacking ships. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the tactical displays update with new information about enemy positions. Around him, his crew prepared for the battle that would determine the fate of both species. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Commander Park, "all fleet elements report ready for combat operations." Stone nodded. Behind them stretched 3 months of preparation, 20,000 ships and the combined will of humanity. Ahead lay the largest naval engagement in galactic history. "Signal all ships," Stone commanded. "Execute Operation Retribution. Show them what happens when you wake up humanity." The great fleet began to divide, each group heading toward its assigned target. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Vex Dominion was about to face an enemy that matched their ruthlessness but exceeded their fury. The dark between the stars was about to catch fire. The first shots of the war were fired simultaneously across 17 star systems. Admiral Stone's plan was working exactly as intended. The Vex Collective, for all their efficiency, had never faced an enemy that attacked everywhere at once. Indhar, the Kepler system, the human assault force dropped out of hyperspace in a formation that defied military logic. Instead of the careful, coordinated approach that any sane commander would use, they came in scattered across millions of cubic kilometers, hitting the alien defenses from every possible angle. Captain Sarah Martinez, commanding the destroyer, Haven's Revenge, found herself facing a Vex fortress ship 3 times her size. The logical thing would have been to retreat and wait for support. Instead, she ordered a direct assault. "All power to forward weapons," she commanded. "Ram speed." Her crew stared at her in shock. Lieutenant Chen, her tactical officer, spoke up carefully. "Ma'am, ramming that ship would be suicide." "Not ramming. Lieutenant, charging. There's a difference." The Haven's Revenge accelerated toward the fortress ship, its plasma cannons firing continuously. The alien vessels returned fire toward chunks from the destroyer's armor, but Martinez kept her ship on course. At the last moment, she ordered full reverse thrust and maximum power to the forward shields. The destroyer didn't ram the fortress ship. It scraped along its hull, firing point-blank into the alien vessel's weapon ports. The fortress ship's armor, designed to deflect long-range fire, couldn't handle plasma cannons firing from contact range. Explosions rippled along the alien vessel's hull as its weapons were systematically destroyed. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Human ships used tactics that no military academy would teach but that worked through sheer audacity. Cargo haulers converted to bomb ships rammed into alien defensive platforms. Fighter squadrons used mining charges as improvised missiles. When conventional weapons failed, human crews found unconventional solutions. But the real shock for the Vex came on the ground. Colonel Morrison led the assault on Kepler 442b, a world the aliens had fortified with ground-based defenses. The planet's surface was covered with biomechanical structures that pulsed with alien life. "Remember," Morrison told his Marines as their dropships descended through the atmosphere, "these things don't think like us. They're connected to each other, sharing information instantly. But that also means they all have the same weaknesses." The Frando dropships landed under heavy fire from Vex ground forces. The aliens had dug defensive positions that would have impressed any human military engineer. Overlapping fields of fire, natural choke points turned into kill zones, backup positions, prepared in depth. But the aliens had made one crucial mistake. They had planned their defenses assuming the humans would attack logically, trying to minimize casualties and preserve equipment. They hadn't counted on an enemy that was willing to sacrifice anything to win. "First wave, advance and draw fire," Morrison ordered. "Second wave, wait for my signal." The first wave of Marines advanced across open ground toward the alien positions. As expected, the Vex opened fire, revealing their defensive positions. Many Marines fell, but their sacrifice wasn't in vain. "Now," Morrison shouted. The second wave didn't attack the alien positions directly. Instead, they used tunneling charges to burrow under the defensive lines. When they emerged behind the Vex positions, the aliens found themselves caught between two forces. But the real surprise came when the humans started adapting Vex tactics against them. Captured alien weapons were quickly reverse-engineered and turned against their creators. Human engineers figured out how to disrupt the quantum communications that linked individual Vex to their collective. "Cut the puppet strings," became the battle cry of human tech specialists. They had discovered that isolated Vex, cut off from their collective, became confused and ineffective. Individual aliens who had been deadly when connected to the hive, mine became easy targets when forced to think for themselves. The battle for Kepler 442b lasted 6 days. The humans lost 30,000 Marines, but they learned valuable lessons about fighting the Vex. Most importantly, they proved that the aliens could be beaten. Meanwhile, in space, the naval battle continued with horrific intensity. The Vex fortress ships were powerful, but they were designed to fight enemies who followed predictable patterns. Human captains seemed to take pleasure in doing the unexpected. Captain Torres, the survivor from Haven's Gate now commanding the heavy cruiser Last Stand, faced a formation of 12 Vex destroyers. The logical response would have been to retreat and call for support. Instead, Torres ordered his ship directly into the center of the enemy formation. "Sir, we'll be surrounded," protested his tactical officer. "Exactly," Torres replied grimly. "And when we explode, we'll take them all with us." But Torres wasn't planning to explode. As the Last Stand entered the center of the Vex formation, he ordered the release of hundreds of mining charges set to detonate on proximity. The small explosives weren't powerful enough to destroy a ship individually, but together they created a spherical blast wave that damaged every Vex vessel simultaneously. While the alien ships were still reeling from the explosions, Torres brought his main guns to bear. At point-blank range, the cruiser's plasma cannons tore through Vex armor like paper. Within minutes, 8 of the 12 destroyers were destroyed, and the survivors retreated in confusion. The fighting spread across 17 systems, and in each one, human forces used the same combination of massive firepower and tactical unpredictability. The Vex Collective, which had conquered dozens of other species through superior coordination and logical planning, found itself facing an enemy that seemed to thrive on chaos. Dr. Vasquez, monitoring the battles from the Fleet Intelligence Center, began to understand why human tactics were so effective against the Vex. They're a collective intelligence, she explained to Admiral Stone. Every decision goes through the central processing system. They can coordinate perfectly, but they can't adapt quickly to completely unexpected situations. And humans are very good at being unexpected, Stone observed. The Admiral was right. Across the battlefields, human commanders were improvising solutions that the Vex couldn't predict. When energy weapons proved ineffective against certain Vex ships, human engineers rigged mass drivers using cargo containers full of scrap metal. When alien fighters proved too fast for conventional pursuit, human pilots used gravity wells from damaged ships to trap them. But the cost was enormous. Human ships were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Casualty reports flooded in from all 17 battlefields. Thousands of dead, entire squadrons wiped out, ships lost with all hands. The hastily built vessels were showing their weakness under combat conditions. "Sir," reported Chief Engineer Valdez from the bridge of the Retribution, "we're losing ships to mechanical failure almost as fast as enemy action. The civilian conversions weren't designed for this level of stress." Stone nodded grimly. He had known this would happen. The fleet had been built for one purpose: to hit the Vex so hard and so fast that mechanical reliability became secondary to firepower. "How long can we maintain this pace?" "Maybe another week of intense combat. After that, we'll need time for repairs and resupply." But a week might be enough. Reports from the battlefields showed that the Vex were struggling to adapt to human tactics. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, they were facing an enemy that fought with emotion rather than logic. The breakthrough came on the 5th day of fighting, in the Proxima system. Commander Lisa Park, leading a squadron of converted civilian ships, stumbled onto something unexpected. Her ships had been attacking a Vex supply convoy when they detected unusual energy readings from one of the alien vessels. "It's not a supply ship," Park reported to Fleet Command. "It's some kind of mobile command center. I'm reading massive quantum communication arrays." Admiral Stone immediately understood the significance. That's how they coordinate their fleets. Take it out and you'll blind every Vex ship in the system. Park's squadron was outnumbered and outgunned, but they had the element of surprise. Her ships were former luxury liners and cargo haulers, converted with heavy weapons but retaining their original speed and maneuverability. "All ships, attack pattern Delta," Park ordered. "We go in fast and hard. Don't try to survive. Just get close enough to hit that command ship." The assault was a suicide run and everyone knew it, but the converted civilian ships proved their worth, using their unexpected speed and agility to close with the command vessel before the Vex could respond effectively. The Silver Star, a former passenger liner now armed with plasma cannons, led the charge. Its captain, Maria Santos, had been running tourist flights to the outer colonies just 6 months earlier. Now she piloted her ship directly into the Vex command vessel's defensive fire. "For Haven's Gate," she shouted as her ship's weapons found their target. The command ship exploded in a spectacular display of alien technology, failing catastrophically. Across the Proxima system, Vex ships suddenly began operating independently, their perfect coordination broken. "This is how we win," Admiral Stone realized as he watched the tactical display. "We don't just destroy their ships, we break their ability to think as one." The battle was far from over, but humanity had found the Vex weakness. The aliens could be beaten, not through superior technology or better tactics, but through the one thing humans had in abundance: the willingness to do whatever it took to protect their own. As the fighting continued across 17 systems, one thing became clear. The Vex had made a fatal mistake when they destroyed Haven's Gate. They had awakened something in humanity that they couldn't understand or predict. They had awakened humanity's capacity for righteous fury. After 3 weeks of fighting across 17 systems, Admiral Stone made a decision that would define the war. Intelligence had located the Vex core worlds, the heart of their empire where the primary collective consciousness resided. Instead of continuing to fight defensive battles, Stone ordered the fleet to regroup for a final assault. The human fleet that assembled for the attack on the Vex core systems was much smaller than the armada that had left Earth. 8,000 ships remained from the original 20,000, scarred by battle and held together by determination as much as engineering. But these survivors were veterans now, hardened by combat and unified by purpose. "This is it," Stone announced to his fleet commanders via quantum communication. "We hit their home systems. We end this war. The Vex have never faced a threat to their core worlds before. They won't be expecting us to come this far." The Vex home system was a nightmare landscape of artificial worlds and spaceborne structures. 3 planets had been completely converted into living machines, their surfaces covered with the biomechanical structures that housed the collective consciousness. Around them orbited hundreds of fortress platforms, each one larger than Earth's moon. But the most terrifying sight was at the system's center. The Vex had built something around the star itself, a massive structure that seemed to be feeding off the sun's energy, using it to power their collective network across the galaxy. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez as the fleet's sensors painted a picture of the alien megastructure. "They've turned an entire star into a computer. That thing must be processing the thoughts of trillions of Vex across hundreds of worlds." The defenses were unlike anything the humans had faced before. The Vex had created artificial black holes to guard the approaches to their core worlds, gravity wells that could tear apart any ship that got too close, energy fields that could disrupt human technology from millions of kilometers away. "Conventional assault is impossible," reported Admiral Chen. "Those gravity wells will destroy any ship that tries to approach the inner system." But Stone had expected this. The final battle would require a different kind of sacrifice. "All ships prepare for ramming speed," he ordered. "We're not trying to survive this battle. We're trying to make sure they don't survive it either." What followed was the largest suicide attack in military history. Thousands of human ships accelerated toward the Vex defenses, not trying to avoid destruction, but embracing it. The first wave of vessels was torn apart by the artificial black holes, but their sacrifice served a purpose. The massive explosions disrupted the gravity wells, creating gaps that the second wave could exploit. Captain Torres, still commanding the last stand, led one of the assault groups toward the second planet. His ship had been patched so many times that it looked more like scrap metal than a warship, but it still had weapons and a crew willing to use them. "Remember," he told his bridge crew as they accelerated toward the planet's defenses, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who died at Haven's Gate. We're fighting for everyone who's going to die if we fail here." The planet's surface opened up like a flower of death, revealing weapon systems that defied human understanding. Energy beams that seemed to bend space itself reached out toward the approaching human ships. But Torres and his crew had learned something important during the long campaign. Sometimes the impossible was just very difficult. "Evasive maneuvers," Torres ordered, even as his ship shook under alien fire. "Get us close enough to deploy the Marines." The Marine assault on the Vex core worlds was led by Colonel Morrison, who had survived every major battle of the war. But this time, he wasn't leading his original Marines. Most of them were dead, killed in the fighting across 17 systems. His new troops were a mixture of survivors from destroyed ships, volunteer civilians, and the infamous Forlorn Hope battalions from the prison colonies. "Listen up," Morrison told them, as their assault craft descended toward the planet's surface. "This isn't like the other battles. Down there is the brain of their entire species. We kill that, we kill them all. But it won't be easy. They'll throw everything they have at us." The landing was a horror that would be remembered in military histories for centuries. The Vex had turned the entire planet into a weapon, and every square meter of surface was defended. But the humans had learned to fight the Vex on their own terms, with absolute ruthlessness and complete willingness to sacrifice anything for victory. Marine Sergeant Maria Santos, sister of the captain who had died destroying the Vex command ship, led her squad through the biomechanical corridors of the alien structure. The walls pulsed with organic life and the air was filled with the sound of alien thought processes. "There," she pointed toward a massive chamber ahead. "That's the primary processing center. If we can plant charges there, We can disrupt their entire network. But the chamber was defended by Vex warriors unlike any they had faced before. These weren't the standard troops from the earlier battles. These were the guardians of the collective consciousness, enhanced with technology and biological modifications that made them nearly unstoppable. "They're not going to let us walk in there," observed Corporal Kim, one of the few original Marines, still alive. "We'll need a distraction." Santos smiled grimly. "I've got an idea, but you're not going to like it." Her plan was insane, even by human standards. While half her squad created a diversion at the main entrance, Santos led the others. Through the planet's waste disposal systems, they crawled through biological filters and organic processing chambers that were never meant to accommodate human life. When they finally reached the processing center, they found themselves in a chamber the size of a city. The walls were covered with neural networks that pulsed with alien thought. At the center was something that might have been a brain, if brains could be the size of skyscrapers and made of living metal. "Plant the charges," Santos ordered. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before they figure out where we are." But they were discovered almost immediately. Vex Guardians poured into the chamber, their weapons targeting the human Marines. Santos realized that half her squad wouldn't survive long enough to complete the mission. "Cover me," she ordered, grabbing the largest charge and running toward the central brain structure. Plasma fire tore through the air around her as she sprinted across the chamber. She felt the heat as enemy shots barely missed her. At the base of the brain structure, Santos planted the charge and set the timer. 30 seconds. Not enough time to escape, but enough time to make sure the job was done. "This is for my sister," she said quietly, thinking of Captain Santos, who had died in the Proxima system. "This is for all of them." The explosion that followed destroyed more than just the processing center. It sent a shockwave through the Vex collective consciousness that reached across the galaxy. For the first time in their species' history, the Vex experienced something they had never known before: fear. But the battle was far from over. Even with their central processing damaged, the Vex still had billions of individuals and thousands of ships defending their core systems. The final assault on the star-based megastructure would require everything humanity had left. Admiral Stone, now aboard his 4th flagship after the previous 3 had been destroyed, led the final attack. Personally, the Retribution had been torn apart in the earlier fighting, replaced by the hastily repaired dreadnought Vengeance. "All remaining ships, form up for final assault," he ordered. "Target the star structure. We end this now." The human fleet, now reduced to fewer than 2,000 vessels, accelerated toward the alien megastructure. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and operating ships that were held together by luck and stubbornness. But they had something the Vex couldn't understand: the absolute refusal to give up. The final battle raged for hours around the converted star. Human ships exploded under alien fire, but their crews kept fighting until the last moment. The Forlorn Hope battalions, true to their name, led suicide runs against the most heavily defended positions. In the end, it came down to a single ship and a single decision. The Vengeance, with Admiral Stone still aboard, broke through the outer defenses of the star structure, but the ship was dying, its hull breached in dozens of places, its crew bleeding and exhausted. "Sir," reported the surviving bridge crew, "we can target the structure's power core, but we'd have to ram it. The ship won't survive." Stone looked around at his crew, men and women who had followed him across the galaxy to fight an impossible war. They had lost friends, family, entire worlds, but they had never lost hope. "Signal all ships," Stone ordered. "Tell them it's been an honor." The Vengeance accelerated toward the heart of the alien megastructure, its remaining weapons firing until the very last moment. When it struck the power core, the explosion was visible from light years away. The star structure collapsed, taking with it the central coordination system of the Vex Collective. Across the galaxy, Vex ships suddenly stopped in mid-flight as their controlling intelligence went silent. The war was over. Humanity had won, but the cost had been enormous. Of the 20,000 ships that had left Earth, fewer than 500 survived to return home. Millions of humans had died, but they had saved billions more from the fate that had befallen Haven's Gate. The galaxy would remember this battle not just as a human victory, but as a warning. The species that lived quietly on the edge of space, growing food and raising families, had shown what they could do when properly motivated. They had turned their entire civilization into a weapon and used it to destroy an empire that had conquered dozens of other species. The shadow of that fleet would hang over the galaxy for generations to come. 6 months after the fall of the Vex core worlds, Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the survey ship New Dawn, watching as human salvage crews worked through the wreckage of the alien megastructure. The converted star still burned, but the massive construction around it was dead metal and cooling organic matter. "Final casualty reports, Commander," reported Lieutenant Park, one of the few surviving officers from Admiral Stone's original staff. 847 ships made it home out of 20,000. Total personnel losses are estimated at 5.2 million dead or missing. Elena nodded grimly. The numbers were staggering, but they could have been worse. Much worse. If the Vex had reached Earth, the casualties would have been measured in billions. What about the alien survivors? Scattered groups across maybe 50 systems. Without their collective consciousness, they seem to be confused. Some are trying to surrender. Others are just sitting motionless in space. A few groups are still fighting, but they're not coordinated anymore. The destruction of the Vex collective consciousness had been more complete than anyone had expected. Individual Vex, cut off from the network that had defined their existence, were struggling to function as independent beings. Most seemed incapable of making decisions without guidance from the central intelligence. "It's almost sad," Elena observed, watching the alien wreckage drift through space. They were so dependent on their collective that they can't exist without it. But Elena's mission wasn't to study Vex survivors. She was here to oversee humanity's message to the galaxy, a message that would be broadcast from the ruins of the UAM alien capital. The recording equipment had been set up in the main debris field where the alien megastructure had once controlled an empire spanning hundreds of worlds. Behind Elena, human ships moved through the wreckage like sharks through a graveyard. "Beginning galactic broadcast," reported the communications officer. "All major civilizations should receive this within 6 standard hours." Elena looked directly into the recording device, her expression calm but her eyes hard as steel. Behind her, the wreckage of the Vex Empire served as a backdrop that no alien civilization could ignore. "This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the Human Colonial Defense Force, broadcasting from the former core system of the Vex Dominion. 6 months ago, an alien force attacked and destroyed one of our colonies. 2.3 million humans died in that attack." She paused, letting that number sink in. A number. To the aliens listening, it might seem like a small loss, just one world among thousands. But what came next would change their perspective. In response to that attack, humanity mobilized the largest military force in galactic history. 20,000 warships, 6 million personnel. We crossed the galaxy, fought through 17 star systems, and destroyed the Vex Empire completely. The camera angle widened to show the scope of the destruction behind her. Alien ships the size of cities floated as dead hulks. Orbital platforms that had once housed millions of Vex were now twisted metal and cooling organic matter. "Let me be very clear about what happened here," Elena continued. "The Vex Dominion was one of the most powerful forces in this galaxy. They had conquered dozens of species. They possessed technology far in advance of our own. They had been expanding for thousands of years." She gestured to the wreckage around her. "And we destroyed them completely, not defeated them, not forced them to retreat. Destroyed them. Their empire is gone. Their fleets are scrap metal. Their collective consciousness is dead." Around the galaxy, alien civilizations watched the broadcast with growing unease. The humans were a young species, barely noticed by most galactic powers. They were farmers and traders, not warriors. But the evidence floating in space told a different story. "Some of you might think this was an overreaction," Elena said, her voice hardening. "One human colony destroyed 6 million aliens dead in return. That seems excessive by any logical standard." She stepped closer to the camera, her expression becoming intensely personal. But you need to understand something about humans. We don't think logically when our families are threatened. We don't calculate acceptable losses when our children are murdered. We don't negotiate with species that view us as food. The message was being received by hundreds of alien civilizations across the galaxy. In the halls of the Galactic Council, representatives watched in stunned silence. On Centauri Prime, the ruling council called an emergency session. Even the warlike Klingon Empire took notice of humanity's demonstration. The Vex made a simple mistake, Elena continued. They assumed that because we were peaceful, we were weak. They thought that because we preferred trade to war, we couldn't fight. They were wrong. Behind her, a human salvage ship was cutting, a part of Vex dreadnought, its plasma torches carving through armor that had once seemed impenetrable. The sight was somehow more disturbing than any weapon, the casual efficiency with which humanity was dismantling their enemies' remains. This is what happens when you attack human civilians, Elena said simply. This is what happens when you threaten our families. This is what happens when you mistake our restraint for weakness. She paused, letting the alien viewers absorb the full scope of what they were seeing. Entire star systems had been turned into graveyards. The most powerful empire in local space had been reduced to scrap metal and fading energy signatures. Humanity has no desire for conquest. We don't want your worlds or your resources. We want to be left alone to raise our families and grow our food and build our lives in peace. The camera pulled back to show Elena standing among the ruins of an empire, her small human form dwarfed by the massive destruction around her. But somehow she looked more dangerous than all the alien technology floating dead in space. But if you threaten us, if you attack our people, if you make the mistake of thinking we're easy prey, then remember this place. Remember the Vex Dominion, and remember that they were more powerful than you are. Across the galaxy, alien military commanders began updating their files on humanity. The species that had been listed as minor agricultural civilization was hastily reclassified. Some marked them as dangerous when provoked. Others simply marked them as avoid at all costs. We held the line at Haven's Gate as long as we could, Elena continued, her voice softening slightly as she remembered Captain Chen's final transmission. Our people died defending their homes, their families, their right to exist. But their sacrifice was not in vain. She gestured to the human fleet, moving through the debris field. Ships scarred by battle but still operational, still dangerous. Because when you kill human civilians, we don't just mourn them. We avenge them. We follow you home. We bring everything we have. The broadcast was being recorded by every major news organization in the galaxy. Within hours, it would be analyzed by xenobiologists, military strategists, and political leaders on 1,000 different worlds. The implications were staggering. Some of you are probably wondering if humanity will turn its attention to other targets, Elena said, reading the question that was on every alien mind. The answer is no. We have no interest in becoming conquerors. We just want to go home and rebuild what we've lost. She looked directly into the camera, her expression serious but not threatening. But remember this, the fleet that destroyed the Vex Empire, that was maybe 10% of humanity's total capacity. We built 20,000 warships in 6 months, while maintaining our civilian economy. Imagine what we could build if we really tried. It was a lie, of course. The war had nearly bankrupted human civilization and left their military exhausted. But the aliens watching didn't know that. All they saw was the evidence of humanity's capacity for destruction. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Elena concluded. Species rise and fall. Empires grow and crumble. Wars are fought over resources and territory and pride. But there's one thing you should remember from all of this. The camera showed one final shot of the human fleet among the alien wreckage, small ships moving through the graveyard of a galactic empire like predators marking their territory. Leave humanity alone. Leave our colonies alone. Leave our ships alone. Because if you don't, we'll show you what happens when a peaceful species decides to stop being peaceful. The broadcast ended, but its effects would ripple across the galaxy for generations. Within days, alien civilizations began establishing formal diplomatic relations with Earth. Trade agreements were signed, non-aggression pacts were negotiated. But more importantly, shipping lanes that passed near human space suddenly found new routes. Military patrols began avoiding human colonies. Pirates who had once preyed on human merchant ships disappeared entirely. The message had been received and understood. Humanity might be peaceful by choice, but they were clearly capable of violence on a scale that defied comprehension. The species that grew food and raised families in quiet colonies had revealed themselves capable of crossing the galaxy to destroy empires. Years later, when alien children asked about the ruins in the former Vex systems, their parents would tell them the story of Haven's Gate, how a minor human colony was destroyed, and how humanity responded by erasing an entire species from existence. The story became a legend throughout the galaxy. Some versions made humanity into monsters, others into heroes. But all versions agreed on one crucial point. When humans said they wanted to be left alone, it was wise to listen. The shadow cast by Admiral Stone's great fleet had become permanent, a dark reminder written in the stars themselves. In the empty systems where the Vex had once ruled, space itself seemed to whisper a warning. Remember Haven's Gate. Remember what happens when you wake the humans. Remember that their mercy is a choice and their fury is absolute. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity was no longer just another species struggling for survival among the stars. They had become something far more dangerous, a civilization that could turn their entire society into a weapon when properly motivated. And in the quiet colonies scattered across human space, farmers went back to growing food, engineers went back to building homes, and families went back to raising their children in peace. Because sometimes the best way to preserve peace is to demonstrate that you're capable of waging war on a scale that no one wants to face. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species and civilizations, but now they all knew one simple truth. There were some lines that should never be crossed and some species that should never be threatened. Humanity had drawn that line in stars and metal, written it in the ruins of an empire, and broadcast it to every corner of the galaxy. The message was clear. We just want to be left alone. But if you won't leave us alone, we'll make sure you can't threaten anyone ever again.